want to get your salesperson in front of them because that's where the sale's made. Because over the phone, especially in an expensive or a technical product, no one's going to buy it over the phone. I mean, it's just not going to happen.
Definitely. Rob, can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
Have you sat near a PC?
Yes.
Okay. How many times whilst we've been on the call have you looked at that PC to see whether you have any emails or anything that you need to be alerted to?
I don't have my email up, so I haven't looked at all.
Okay. Generally, when you're talking to someone on the phone, and this is what I find, is that we think that we've got the full attention of someone just because they're listening. In actual fact, they could be pouring themselves a glass of wine, they could be sipping coffee, they could be eating a sandwich, they could be answering an email.
Sure.
It's very rare that we just need to be honest as salespeople. The people that we're talking to on the telephone are not paying full attention, which is why you give them the big picture and you give them the concept. Talk about technicalities and you'll lose them.
Yep.
Right.
I definitely agree with that. So do you typically, or do you think there's any general rule about whether or not a salesperson ought to be making his own appointments, or whether that ought to be something that ought to be done, or does it depend?
In my experience, the worst person to make a telemarketing call seems to be the salesperson.
Because he gets into the selling.
He gets into the selling. He wants to talk. He wants to divulge his knowledge of the product, and he relies now, or she relies now, on past presentations, past solutions that they've given customers. They start name dropping. They start saying, well, this is what happened here. We put this in here. We use HTML to do this. We use XML to do that. The salesperson is too knowledgeable about the product to be able to sell it over the telephone, in my experience.
Yeah, and I think that depends a lot on the product. I mean, I really do, because obviously if you already have a relationship with the person, then you're the one making the phone call to get the thing is probably the best approach. But for brand new people, I could see how having a kind of a service or someone back at the office doing it could be, more effective. Something to at least keep in mind. People ought to think about it, even if it breaks every rule or every paradigm they've got for how appointments are made. Think about the fact of, what if I did have somebody in the office doing this dialing and trying to make the appointment? Is that something that could free up time for me to sell? Whether or not it makes sense, will be depending on the situation, but it's something you ought to at least ask the question to yourself.
And we're talking initial appointment, too, because, initial appointment is probably better not, because I know I tend to get bogged down in the actual selling of the product, but once I've made the initial appointment and I'm on the phone, you're at a different place in the conversation. You can talk technically, because usually you're talking to somebody that at least he already knows he's qualified, he's got some interest in your product, whereas the initial call, I'm just trying to get you to talk to me and let me come in and, talk to you for 5-10 minutes.
Yep. Cool.
There is one other point for someone different to make the initial call, and that is they can often rely on their naivety when a technical question comes their way. That's something that you need to ask the salesperson.
Right.
So you can actually sell the appointment on the fact that, I understand the concept, I understand the big idea and what it's going to do for you, but the actual technicalities, there are far better skilled people to do that happen to be salespeople. So when can we book an appointment? Is it going to be a morning or afternoon?
Perfect. So now shifting gears again, shifting to this face-to-face meeting. We're about to have the meeting with the customer for the first time, with a prospective customer. What do you think the keys are for effectively pre-call planning? How do you set the meeting up beforehand to make sure that the meeting is going to have the most value it can possibly have?
Okay. Right, let me think about this one. Firstly, a telemarketer should always, in my opinion, whilst on the telephone call, whilst the customer is there and paying attention, is to get that person to write it in their diary or to put it into Outlook or whatever they're using. Actually get them to put that appointment into their diary.
Okay.
The reason for that is because we can now use the thing called role projection, where you could say, now, Robert, can you make sure that whilst you're here, can you just get your diary out? Can you put that in your diary? Because there is nothing worse than for a salesperson. I'm sure it's the same in your industry, where a salesperson turns up and the CEO's either forgotten to to write it in his diary, forgot about the appointment, worse still, has got another appointment planned, or passes you over to someone that can't make a decision.
Yeah, it's the bane of a salesperson's existence.
Absolutely, and especially when you say something like, yeah, I'm sure it's the same in your industry, Robert, you know, when people forget to turn up or they've forgotten to write in their diary, so actually get them to write it down whilst you're on the phone is an enormous benefit.
Okay.
Secondly, at the end of a telephone call, I would always give them some additional information that you've kept behind. I like to call this like a soft exit. Something like, oh, but before you go, Robert, if you mention about a particular product, we've got an incentive running this month, so when Gary comes to see you, just mention that because I forgot to tell you in the body of the telephone call. Give him something to grasp hold of at the end of the call. Otherwise, all that happens is they feel that they've been closed into an appointment that they didn't really want.
Okay, something that kind of links the meeting in their mind with something, some interesting thing they're going to get in the meeting or something to just kind of put them into the future when that meeting's going to I need to remember to ask this question or I need to remember to ask about this.
Right. Absolutely, and I mean, I've taken this a little stage further, and I guess this only works for certain companies as well. The telemarketer or the telesalesperson will often give some information about the salesperson. You know, something like, oh yeah, if Gary has come to see you now, don't mention when he went out the other night because it was extremely messy. Because if I now walk in and the CEO says, so what happened to you last Friday night? I hear it was extremely messy. I now tell my story. I now become the entertainer, and now we've hit it off. We've got great rapport.
Yep.
And that all came from the initial call.
Yep, that's great.
Good. I like that strategy.
That's great.
Another one would be, Robert, but before we end this call, should I need any information? Is it yourself that I come back to, or shall I talk to a general manager or someone else within the business? Now, generally, what happens is that they will say, no, I'm probably not the best person to deal with, but if you talk to Steve Chambers, my general manager, he'll be able to answer any questions.
Okay.
Now, the reason for doing that is because I would urge everyone to make that second call. The reason why you make that second call is because you can use certain words within the conversation. This will all make sense in a minute. So, I hang up with the CEO, being Robert, and at some point in the future, probably the following day, I now call Steve. And I talk to Steve, and I say, hi Steve, yeah, I'm coming, one of our sales guys is coming to see you regarding XYZ product. Robert has invited us in on Tuesday the 22nd of October.
Okay.
The important word in there is invited. Because invite is not the same as meeting. An invitation to a third person means that Robert had a great idea who contacted us and has gotten us in.
Yeah? Yep, it seems like a small distinction between two words, but it's a world of difference in what it means.
Absolutely. The word invite to Steve, if I was calling Steve, Robert's invited one of our sales guys in to come and have a look at updating your current telephone system. I just need some additional information if that's okay. Now, to Steve, the word invite means that it's his CEO's idea to get me in. Therefore, he complies with my every question that I ask.
Yep.
Now, I can get some information from Steve that I would not be privy to if I asked the CEO, because I use the word invite instead of I'm coming for a sales meeting.
Right, and I'm going to clear my schedule to make sure I have time to see you, too.
Absolutely. And the word invite, in its very nature, means that now you're not Steve, the third person, is not acting on my behalf. He's acting on the wishes of his CEO, the person that pays his money, so therefore he complies with my every question.
Right. Yeah, I think it's brilliant. I mean, all the salespeople out in the audience need to do to think about this is to think about how differently they're treated when somebody has called them up for whatever reason with a need for their product out of the blue. They've picked up the phone and they've called into Gary and said, you know, hey, I want to talk to you about your product, about how different of a mindset that is than when Gary's making the contact by initiating the phone call and saying, hey, I've got something, are you interested in buying it? I mean, it's a world of difference in the way that you're perceived. And by using the word invite, you're getting that first one, which is that, it's at the behest of the customer.
So when the salesperson, let's use me as an example, Gary. I turn up at a business premises. Now, I'm going to be greeted by a receptionist or a switchboard operator. I'm not sure what term you would use in the US. Would it be a receptionist?
Receptionist, yeah.
Receptionist,
okay. So I'm presented with a receptionist. Now, when ordinarily what a sales guy would say is that, hi, it's Gary May from XYZ Company. I've got a meeting with Rob at 10 o'clock. And they would leave it at that.
Yep.
That identifies me as a salesperson. Now, notice the difference when I say, hi, it's Gary May from XYZ Company. Rob's invited me for a meeting regarding your so-and-so. Again, that implies that Rob had a great idea, that he sourced the best company to come in and have a look at at what we're looking at. Now, when I go and meet the CEO, and I'm sat in the boardroom, I'm sat in their office, the information that the receptionist has got is that I've been invited in. Now, I'm going to take this a little stage further if we've got time, which is, who is the biggest gossip and the biggest gossip in that premises? Who's the person that talks about everyone else more than anyone else?
The receptionist.
It's normally the receptionist. So that if people have noticed you in the reception area, and someone from around that business went to the receptionist and said, who was that guy that stood in reception wearing that smart suit? Oh, I don't know. His name's Gary. Rob's invited him in to have a look at X, Y, and Z. Now that person goes off and says, did you know that Rob's invited someone in to have a look at our XYZ printer, for instance? That person then goes and tells another person and says, yeah, apparently Rob's invited someone in to have a look at changing our XYZ printer. Now suddenly you get a Chinese whisper going around the whole company.
Yep. I can imagine the television ad I've seen where, somebody passes along a secret and there's a guy's walking through the office or whatever, and you can see kind of peripherally all around him, people are whispering, and by the time he gets to the end of the hallway, the news has already passed all the way through, both sides of cubicles and all that, and it's no longer a secret, because you're absolutely right. The receptionist is talking to everybody all the time. And
that's all because we use the word invite when we introduce ourselves.
Yep.
And also what I'd say when we stood in a reception area is to say hello to everybody. Everybody that walks past, just say good morning, say hello, how are you, have a great day, or whatever. Make yourself be seen by people so that it instigates them going back to the reception and say, who was that guy there? Because generally, what people will assume is you were there for an interview, for a job.
Right.
So they want to know who you are and what job you're going for. The receptionist will give them the information that you gave them, which is either, oh, he's here for a sales meeting, or he's trying to sell someone a printer, or, oh, Rob's invited him in to have a look at changing our printers.
Right. Because everybody's going to go up to the reception and go, hey, who's that guy and what's he here for? I mean, everybody's going to ask that.
Exactly. So you, as a salesperson, and I think this is what's different about what us guys do, is that we think about how the words that we use influence the very people that we're talking to. Whereas a traditional salesperson doesn't even think about what he says to a receptionist, whereas for me, that is the start of my sales presentation.
It's the beginning of the whisper campaign.
Absolutely, because at some point in the premises, and I think maybe later if we get time I can talk about it, I would urge everyone to go out and walk around that business, because in 40 minutes, imagine how many people have been told that there's someone in that the CEO's invited in to change a printer or an IT infrastructure. You will get one person come up to you when you're on your walkabout and say, oh, so what's this about we're getting a new IT infrastructure? Can it do this?
Yep.
They've already been sold.
Yep.
Right.
And you're walking around with a CEO. When that works, you have to stop yourself from grinning.
Yep. It sounds great.
And I think also, that puts you in the mindset of they're actually selling it all the time as soon as you walk in the door. Because I have had experiences with other salespeople when the only time they're really in selling mode and acting like a professional is when they're in front of you. They can be sitting out in the lobby, flirting with the receptionist and kind of just sitting there not paying attention to anything, and they're not on, and so it's very unprofessional until they're in front of the CEO, and then they change their personality when they step out of his office, where this way, you're on the whole time because you realize that everything you're doing is a part of the sales process.
Yeah, absolutely.
It kind of also, you mentioned whenever anybody's walking through in the reception area, the importance of just, saying a nice word or saying hello, that sort of thing. Comes back, reminds me of something that happened to me like 20 years ago. Probably one of my earlier sales calls, and I was in this business, and I've always been kind of friendly to people, so I had said, hello, how you doing, to this guy that came through. He looked like the janitor. And we all get in this conference room, and it's a big project. It was $250,000 20 years ago. That was a heck of a lot of money. And we're going through the meeting, and they said, well, we need you to meet our owner of our company because he's going to make the final decision. And in comes this guy that looks like the janitor. And sits down at the front of the table, big old cigar in his mouth. And, and I think it helped the fact that, I was friendly to him. We ended up getting the business. I mean, it wasn't purely because of that, but at least I didn't make a stupid mistake and treat him like a janitor. Can't always judge a book by its cover.
And it made a tremendous difference that you treated him nicely. You didn't look down on him and say something rude or, just act like you're just a janitor, because that will kill your sale.
Yeah. I know we've got... Go, Gary.
I was just going to say, the thing is that every sales guy needs to understand is that there isn't one strategy that is going to get you 100% of the business. It's all these little incremental 1% chances of getting the business. And, the word invite, saying hello to people in the reception area, just helps you get those extra 1%, whereas all your competition, not only are they not doing it, they don't even know about it.
Absolutely. Well, Gary, I know we had originally scheduled about an hour, a little bit more. We're running pretty long on this. I got a few other questions for you. Is it possible we could do a second call at some point in the not too distant future and go through a few more of these things that we were going to talk about today, and just maybe hit a few more things now and then do a little bit more later?
I'd be absolutely honored, Rob.
Okay. I'd rather do that than trying to rush through and not do a great job, because, so much of what we're talking about is just is coming out of the conversation.
And it's such great material. I'd like to not be standing in the middle of a parking lot when we're talking about it. So
yeah.
That's great.
The whole thing that we were talking about with treating people with respect. Gordon Ramsay, is he a pretty famous guy over in Britain too, I would imagine?
If Gordon Ramsay's on the television, I'm watching it.
Yeah, I love Gordon Ramsay.
Oh, me too.
He's got a show over...
Maybe I could get away with what he does.
He's got a show over here called Hell's Kitchen.
I watched it this evening, in fact.
Okay.
Your one.
It's a great show, but he did the same thing, and Richard Branson did the same thing when he did his little reality show for the Millionaire show that Richard Branson of Virgin Airways did. And what they did is they both dressed up like the taxi driver when they put on a little costume and a wig and a mustache and all that, and when they picked up their reality show contestants at the airport, the guy that was driving the bus or the guy that was driving the taxi was actually the head honcho, and he just listened to what they were saying when they didn't know that Gordon Ramsay was around, and or when Richard Branson was around in his case. And he had an immediate, there was like 2 or 3 people that were spouting off and making all kinds of, and weren't kind to the other people and were just jerks, and, they immediately had major demerits against them, and some people were, nice and immediately, had a leg up, and other people just didn't have an opinion one way or the other. But it's kind of the same kind of idea. You never know who's looking at what you're doing.
No, and it's all about setting yourself apart from the person that's sat in reception waiting for a sales call, and you just know that all they've got is a briefcase, a presentation folder, and they're looking to sell a product. The person that stands up, that's friendly, that's bubbly, who's an entertainer, who talks to the receptionist, we're just separating ourselves from everyone else, because let's face it, if we are the same as every other salesperson that walks through that business, the guy that we're sitting with, or the lady that we're sitting with, they know how to get you out of the door. They've done it 50, 100, 150 times. By setting yourself apart, they have no armory in, well, this is a standard technique to get this sort of person out the door. They just don't know how to do it.
Absolutely. Well, Gary, just to wrap up this call, you mentioned earlier this business acceleration blueprint, and you're the CEO of that. Could you give us the listeners a little bit of an idea what that's all about?
Absolutely. The business acceleration blueprint came about because being a technical person and studying maths and physics at uni, I kind of think I'm quite a technical, logical thinker. And it kind of struck me one day that a company may acquire a certain product, and the way they go about trying to put this to market is they have the product in front of them, and now they try and work out what steps they have to use to push this product uphill until such times that someone buys it.
Okay.
And this is a standard procedure that I think most, 99% of customers and companies go through. The way that I looked at it was completely from the opposite direction, which is why I've called it the blueprint. I started at what character traits and emotions need to be satisfied for a customer that has bought my product to unconditionally refer me to someone else. Once I understood what they were, I put those emotions and characteristics into the consolidation of the sale. And then from there, I took those emotions and what needed to be satisfied there, and I built those into a sales presentation. Once I understood how to get that, I now built those emotions and characteristics into a telemarketing call, into the data sourcing, into the prospecting, all the way back, and then what we end up with is a product. And it doesn't matter what product you've got, so long as you understand what route you need to take, which in my opinion is from backwards to front.
Okay.
That's why I've called it the blueprint.
So you look at the customer that's totally satisfied with a perfect outcome and everything is fantastic, and he would be, a raving fan of your product, and
yes.
Then you figure out what has to happen all the way leading up to that moment in order to make that person to be that raving fan.
Absolutely, yeah. So for someone to unconditionally refer my product, service, or idea to someone else without me even asking, what characteristics need to be met? Now, traditionally, that's going to be great, fantastic, exceptional customer service.
Right.
It's going to mean that the customer has no question unanswered. It means they're going to feel seduced. It means they're going to feel comfortable with working with me and have working with me. So what can I do to now build that into the sales presentation so that what we end up with is exceptional customer service without the customer having any questions? You see the idea, and I just work backwards.
Okay.
And make sure that every characteristic is ticked off, looking from the end back to the start. And what we end up with is a product, whereas everyone else looks at the product and thinks, how can we now sell this?
So is this a system that is in a kit form, product form, or is it something that they do one-on-one with you and your team, or is it how is the product delivered?
Currently, it's done on a consultancy basis. I will actually go into a company and we'll actually spend some time with them and identify these characteristics and what they sell and how they sell, and we'll actually integrate it into what they currently do.
Fantastic, Gary. Well, Stephen, I really appreciate your time today. I really think you've given us an incredible amount of good information, and I can't wait to.
I've not started yet, Rob. I've not started.
I know. I can't wait to get to. I can't wait to get to part 2 of this, where we're going to actually be sitting in front of the customer. We've had the whisper net has already passed its little whispers about the fact that you've been invited into the call, and we've got the person qualified, and we've got the right salesperson that's entertaining in front of them, and I'm looking really forward to part 2 where we get into that sales meeting.